And so it's this weird thing because we have this, simultaneously people are saying, I'm really motivated by money, but they're simultaneously saying I'm motivated by the greater good. But that where it gets even more interesting is when you break it down by gender and race. So one of the reasons I'm so interested in inclusive innovation is that we know women, they invent in areas that often serve women. So things like women's health, which is understudied relative to other areas. And same thing for different technologies. Maybe it's a consumer product that a black male engineer is going to create something in the consumer space that maybe nobody else had thought about before. Hi, I'm Jillian Grennan, and I am at UC Berkeley in the Haas School of Business, where I teach finance and sustainability. Most people are engineers that solve problems, but firms, they need to protect those solutions to problems. And so the firms are going to do this through things like trademarks, or copyright, or patents, or even trade secrets. And so intellectual property is really fully encompassing of those sets of tools that they can use to help them protect ideas within their firms and sort of help eventually, sell products that are better and help improve the economy and everybody. The question is about invention, and what is the invention process really like? And I think a lot of people might, especially as academics, have this view of being more collaborative and more collegial. And so most people haven't been able to look inside the black box of firms because firms like to be secret. And so what we did was work through the Diversity Pilots Initiative, which I'm principal at. We worked with a lot of high-tech firms, and we were able to survey the employees within the firm and ask them to reveal their truth about the firm. And so what we ended up learning is actually it is not collaborative. And it's actually a lot more competitive, that ideas that get submitted actually get rejected, where I think a lot of us think that good ideas should go forward, but it's expensive, right, to protect intellectual property. And so this was sort of part of one thing that we uncovered. And because it's focused a little bit on diversity, one of the things we wanted to best understand was, hey, we've learned before, if you've ever had kids and sat in a classroom, right, that women are less likely to raise their hand, right? They're not going to opt in necessarily. And this is exactly what we think it might be going on a little bit within firms internally, is if it's a competitive process where you do have to opt in, maybe solutions should be different. Maybe it shouldn't be opt-in. Maybe the default should be opt-out. So we conducted a set of interviews with patent professionals at a wide variety of firms. So we wanted to talk to both startups, we wanted to talk to the biggest firms in the economy that everybody knows the names of, as well as international firms. And what we learned through this process of what is the steps in it, they can be widely ranging across firms. And so most firms have something where an individual engineer can submit an idea on their own to, honestly, a pretty anonymous portal that you might not hear back from for 3 months, and so it doesn't feel probably so instantaneously gratifying. Their other options are through brainstorming sessions, or you could call it a hackathon, something like that, where it's either led by a senior engineer or a patent professional, and they will help collect ideas. And then the third option, which sort of relates back to this opt-in versus opt-out, is patent professionals. They can actually reach out to people that they know, and they're like, what are you working on? Or they could actually just say, hey, I know who's previously submitted a patent to me, and it's been successful. Let me keep going back to those same people rather than the full set of people. And so you're starting to see that even in this process, and this is to getting to idea submission, right? Which we thought would be the first step. And what we learned was actually there's steps before this, right? Who are managers, and are they signing you to projects that are likely to yield invention? And so we thought it all started at the idea stage. And then even once it gets into this idea stage, that I was telling how ideas sort of get submitted, then you typically have a patent professional do an initial screen of it. And if they like it, then you have an opportunity to potentially update it before you would go and present in front of a patent review board. This is going to have some senior engineers, it's going to have some attorneys on it, and they're basically going to decide if this idea is worthy of being submitted as a patent application. And then even after that, even if you file a patent application, which we have a ton of statistics on thanks to the USPTO, there's going to be a whole process of a 2-year process to eventually even learn if it gets granted, and there might be back and forth because you go back and forth with the USPTO. The US Patent and Trademark Office, they had not initially collected data on gender when people used to apply for patents. They've recently changed to do that. But they went back historically and sort of reclassified a bunch of old patent applications. And what they found was, we know in the US the STEM workforce is roughly 30% female. But if you look at the number of patent applications that are female, it's only around 12 to 13%. So much lower. And so that was really what drove us. We call this the innovator-inventor gap. And it's really this idea that 96% of people in our survey said, regardless if they were a male or a female, that they solve problems. And that is really what invention is. It is being a problem solver. It's coming up with an innovative solution. And so when we had to, sort of figure out, why are they not actually submitting ideas? Or why are they actually not getting to this patent application process? We wanted to keep unfolding these different layers moving up there. And so part of us thinking about it was, let's just ask them directly. But there's different ways in a survey to ask people. And so we framed it both positively, we framed it both negatively. And then he's like, well, imagine you were somebody that might be more diverse than yourself or whatever. What do you think their barriers are? And so these different ways of phrasing the question, we were able to sort of create a forced ranking of, or a pecking order of what is the most important factor down to probably what's, while still an important factor for firms to potentially change, maybe not the most important first order one to tackle. And, I'm a finance scholar originally. I was not gonna go into management, but it is the number one thing that comes up, and it's management practices. And so we really saw it come out in a lot of different ways. So that's the number one factor preventing it. Managers are not allocating women to projects that are likely to yield patentable inventions. But if you go back to the management literature, there's always talked about high performance leadership, and there's different things that leaders can do to make their firm better. And one of them is about information flows. Do you share the right amount of information with the people below you and above you? And what we learned is women feel much less likely that their manager is actually sharing this information with them. If we think of invention as being a process of getting all the little pieces of information together to eventually create some novel breakthrough or even just some incremental change that's going to help everybody, that you need to have those flows. So that was that, but then also we could see it on the flip side. So managers are supposed to be actively removing barriers, right? They're supposed to be actively trying to make their employees rise up and be the best that they can be. And we find that this is not happening, that actually we see a lot of suggestions that there's no integrity, that if somebody is perhaps not getting assigned to the project that they should be, that if somebody speaks out, there's no, it's actually the opposite. You might get retaliated against, or there's nobody who does something that's biased and then the management actually reprimands them. And so this fact that just by not being negative seems to be hurting integrity. And so these are sort of two things that sort of play into then the next set of factors. And so management practices was one. Number two is motivation, and number three was culture. And we asked many more, so that actually ranks down to 12. But the culture really is sort of related then to this collaboration and integrity as well. So that's how you can think about that. And then to think about this motivation, this is one of those things that I really love to explore more, because not only did we see, different firms have different incentive policies to help people become inventors. And so it could be nothing. This is your job. You're an engineer. You're supposed to invent. Or it could be, wow, you just submitted an idea. We're going to give you, because we don't know if it's a breakthrough idea yet, we're going to give you a little Amazon gift card, cool for now, or a plaque or a t-shirt to say, look, I just submitted an idea. I'm great. But then after that, if it does go to a patent application, we're going to give you a bonus. And this could be monetary, $2,000. It could be much more. Okay? And so these are this different incentives. So we think of those as pecuniary incentives. But there's also what we think of as non-pecuniary incentives. And this was one that I actually had to spend a lot of time convincing the execs to put on the question, but I really wanted to know more about sort of pro-social motivation or intrinsic motivation, which is something I've thought deeply about. And so I got them to say, I am problem solving for the greater good. Okay, that is actually what comes in as number two, is people's response out of all these factors. And so it's this weird thing, because we have this simultaneously people are saying, I'm really motivated by money, but they're simultaneously saying, I'm motivated by the greater good. But where it gets even more interesting is when you break it down by gender and race, right? So one of the reasons I'm so interested in inclusive innovation is that we know women, they invent in areas that often serve women. So things like women's health, which is understudied relative to other areas. And same thing for different technologies. Maybe it's a consumer product that a black male engineer is going to create something in the consumer space that maybe nobody else had thought about before. And so we were really interested to see that actually minorities are really motivated by these monetary incentives, but at the same time they were the same ones who are also could be, and women in particular, they're both motivated by pro-social benefits, much more than what we would think of as sort of the representative group of engineers, which would be white males or Asian males. Innovation is sort of one of those big picture ideas that has changed our lives. The biggest catalyst I can think of are really these inventions that have just shifted over time. And we've maybe been in this era where we both got computers early. Now we're getting Gen AI. It's going to change our lives. And so I want to understand who's bringing about the things that are going to change our lives. And in particular, I am a millennial, so there is a sense that maybe I saw Facebook and all these things come out, and that you had this feeling that, hey, is my best interest there? And so I love this idea that you could have these pro-social inventions coming out that maybe are different, and then these really private, monetarily positive inventions that firms can make a lot of money off of. And so trying to understand how we, as a group of people who are living in a society together, can make sure we get more of these ones that help everybody, as opposed to maybe one of these ones that certainly help some people, but they mostly line the pockets of a few limited people. And so that's really, I wanted to, I think anybody who's a teacher, it's public service. You go into it because you care, and I cared about everybody. I have little kids. I want them to have a better life. What we're working on at the Diversity Pilots Initiative, it's really early stage. We started 1.5 years ago. We've raised funds. We've worked with a number of firms now, and I think it's the beginning of something that can have a lot more momentum. We have started a newsletter and a blog series putting all this information to highlight these stories of diversity, whether it's about open source collaboration. Do women's projects get commercialized faster? I've learned so much from everybody out there, and so for anybody who might be a young researcher or really just a professional who's saying, look, I've grappled with these problems at my firm. They're not easy problems to solve. Well, we're talking to people to try and help everybody just share that collective knowledge so that we can solve these problems and hopefully help everybody be elevated and everybody succeed a little bit more.